Hi again, everybody. This is Will Davis. I've decided to do this week's video on the Barr typewriter. It's one of my favorite machines. It's a fairly obscure typewriter. It's in a large number of collections, but not a lot is said about it. Much less is written about it, at least in a technical sense. And it's not familiar to many people. And in fact, this machine was obscure even when it was in production. We probably said more about it in the last 20 years than was said while it was being made. So, got a couple variants here, like more common variants you might think of, and then over there is something really interesting, but it's going to take me a few minutes to get to that, so you might want to get a drink. Anyway, the Barr typewriter was designed by John Barr, who had left Remington. He'd been a senior design engineer for Remington for a number of years. One of the machines he worked on there was the Smith Premier Visible, which is the machine that replaced the full double keyboard upstrike that's so familiar. Here we have a 10A. Very nice machine. He left in 1923 to form Barr Morse Corporation, which is a joint venture with Morse Chain in Ithaca, New York. The first interesting thing I can tell you is that the first prospectus for Barr Morse announced it as a manufacturer of calculating machines. That's interesting because Barr Morse was partners in sharing a facility with the Peters Morse Corporation that was manufacturing adding machines. And in fact, Peters Morse got started first. They were the first out of the gate with actual machines on the market, and they didn't do too well. Take a look here. There's a couple advertisements I printed off from Ithaca newspapers. This is the Morse Chain Company's plant site on the top of South Hill in Ithaca, and you can see the older buildings that just added onto over many years and extending over here. And then there's an extra building over here in the corner. This is all still standing right now, this building too. If we look at that building I just pointed out, over here we see this structure. This is the building that was shared by Peters Morse and Barr Morse. And both machines, the Peters adding machine, it's called the Peters adding machine, and the Barr typewriter, were actually manufactured on the same equipment in this plant. There's a basement down here. This first floor here was where all the sheet stock was delivered and tested, and the stamping and punch press machines are here for punching out parts. So this body on here is stamped. These primary key levers, secondary key levers are all stampings. Ribbon spools are stamped. There's a lot. Machine is manufactured mostly of punchings and stampings. Second floor is automatic screw machines. And if I remember right, plating from the press release I read. Automatic screw machines are used to manufacture rod stock and fasteners. They can be set up to produce part after part after part after part. Third floor was offices for both companies, and then fourth floor was assembly. That's, of course, that had the best light. So the machines were all assembled on that top floor there. Peters Morse got into money trouble in the middle 1920s. They owed Morse Chain, the owner of the whole site and part investor, a whole lot of money. And so two things happened. The company brought in Ralph C. Allen, and you might remember him as R.C. Allen from later on, R.C. Allen Business Machines in Michigan, but at this point, he hasn't formed that yet. He's manufacturing the Allen calculating machine, and he's bought the company making the Wales adding machine. Morse brings him in to form a new company to market this Peters adding machine much better, to get it a distributor network and just get it on its feet. But before that can happen, the bankers and accountants close in, and they want something to be determined about this operation, so they force a sale of the assets in this plant, which ends up getting bought by Morse Chain. So what happens is the assets attributable to Peters Morse end up being owned by a new adding machines division of Morse Chain. This happens in 1927, and also in 1927, Ralph C. Allen does set up the Allen Wales Corporation to market the adding machines. That probably explains why I was recently able to pick up this pile of a bunch of unused Peters adding machine label plates. These were riveted to the front of the machine, and the Allen Wales doesn't use a label plate. It's just decaled on the front. So none of these shows any signs of ever having been attached to a machine. These were obtained from somebody who lived in Ithaca originally and may have worked at the plant. So who knows exactly how they got out, but we know why there are spares, because there would have been machines sitting in the plant during the determination of this sale that would have been Peters, but are now going to be Allen Wales. Anyway, getting back to this is all settled by the end of 1927, and finally, in October 1927, the Barr typewriter appears on the market. And that's originally one model. That's this machine right here, a single model. A couple interesting things about this machine for the date that it's released. This is a segment-shifted typewriter, so it's the first big portable in the U.S. that's segment-shifted. This also has what's called perpendicular key action. That's what Barr's term for it was, which means that the key stem moves straight down to the tabletop. It remains completely vertical, which a lot of people think is easier to type with. I think it is. It's easier to adapt to. Other companies have called this parallel key action or piano key action, and that's as opposed to machines, say, with a full-length key lever hinged at the back that swings through a shallow arc, or later small portables with very short primary key levers that are just bell cranks that swing through a considerably short arc at the front. These are very easy to adapt to. So this machine hits the market and is manufactured off and on for a number of years. I say off and on because there seem to be periods when it's just not advertised. Then it comes back. This may be because the Allen Wales adding machine did take off, did pretty well. Dealers were set up all over the country. That may have taken space for Barr to manufacture the typewriters. Don't know the exact relationship, but we do know they were made at the same time on the same equipment, or possibly cyclically on the same equipment in that plant. Anyway, of course, the Great Depression happens. The machine is split into two models. A special is released in November 1929 that's reduced in features and cost. Some tooling is sent to Canada in 1934. The machine is briefly put into production there. That's not a success. And at some point, production shuts down. Now, we know it shuts down because in 1937, it is announced that new investors have shown up on the scene to buy the production of the Barr typewriter and put it back in production. Now so Barr Morse Corporation is the established entity. The company that comes along is a new Barr Typewriter Corporation with new money. And if we take a look at this later machine, this happens to be a Macy's Portable #1. If we take a look at the back here on this thing, we can see, it's kind of dirty, but we can see USA Barr Typewriter Corporation, Weedsport, New York. Now here's what happens. These investors come along, they buy the rights to build the machine, and they move production to Weedsport, New York, in a very small plant. And this machine is only produced for about 2 years, from the end of 1937 until the end of 1939, or sometime in 39, or maybe early 1940. Years ago, by the way, here's my binder on the Barr, like you saw the one for the Harris. I was in contact with the Leonardi family, who actually did the plating on these machines in Weedsport. The parts were actually sent across the street from the Barr Typewriter Corporation plant to the Leonardi plant to get plated and then returned. And the younger Leonardi remembers his father saying that production ended in 39 for sure. So I would take that to be solid. Serial numbers on these machines here, at the end, these are coded. So it's hard to say how many were actually made. These run from about 37,000 to about 40,000, so maybe 3,000 machines over just those few years. So a fairly obscure typewriter. Now here's an interesting thing. One more thing. You notice that this machine has crinkle paint on it. This machine is smooth enamel. That's a pretty easy, quick way to tell these apart. Also, white key legends, black key legends. There are a number of other ways, but obviously the decal, but from a distance, you should be able to spot one from the other, although there are examples that cross that line. Over here is a ringer. And this typewriter, in order to understand this, I have to tell you about a fact I learned fairly recently, right before finding this machine for sale and buying it immediately. So, when these guys came to Barr, the typewriter was not in production. The factory was shut down, at least the typewriter production was shut down, and the machine was effectively not on the market. So what they did was they made an arrangement. This is all reported in local newspapers. They made an arrangement with Barr Morse Corporation to temporarily restart production of the typewriter in the Morse chain plant, that same plant that I showed you there, so they could, quote, get a look at what typewriter manufacturing looked like. So when they went to do that, they discovered that they didn't have all the parts on hand that they needed. They had to scramble, get parts out in town from contractors, and they were able to assemble machines. Once they figured out what that looked like, they knew what they needed to buy for a plant. They obviously got all the tooling to take with them to Weedsport to build these typewriters, and they put them back in production. Now, knowing that fact, one might ask the question, well, they put the machine into production in order to find out what typewriter manufacturing looked like, what manufacturer's machine looked like. What happened to those typewriters? Well, what would you say if I told you this is one of them? So, this, like this, Macy's Portable No. 1, which are always Weedsport machines. This is also a Macy's Portable No. 1, but it's shiny. Okay? If we turn this around, I'm going to make a little noise here, we will see this typewriter says, made in the USA by Barr Typewriter Corporation, Ithaca, New York. There is only one way that happens, and that is if this machine is one of the ones assembled by Barr Typewriter Corporation in the plant of Morse Chain during that period of finding out what typewriter production looks like. Might be 3 of these. My serial number list tells me that there are 3 of these. One was formerly in the Onondaga collection. One used to be Dennis Clark's. This was Herman Price's, came to me through Greg Fudage. Now, sharp-eyed collectors out there will already be asking the question, how is this already a Macy's Portable No. 1 when it's made during that test period? And that's a solid question. It begs the question, were these investors actually working on behalf of Macy's to get a typewriter to produce for Macy's? I don't see any other way that happens this way. In other words, Macy's has to be involved from the start of this at some point. Do they just have a contract? Do they have some ownership? Haven't been able to find that out yet, but it's certainly an interesting question. So, for those of you out there that are shopping for typewriters, and if you see Barrs, and you see one anything like this, make sure they show you the back. Okay? So there, that's a quick look at the varieties of these things you might find, a short look at the history. I do want to add a brief housekeeping note before I end this video. I might start doing some short videos on Saturdays. These are going to come out early in the week, midweek, and each one is going to feature some kind of a topic that relates to collecting, to collectors. Things that I've found out that I think you'll think are interesting. I have other observations, other things to say. I was thinking about doing a short, more relaxed type of informal video on Saturdays. So pay attention for those. You might see those. I'm also looking forward to doing an Austin Typewriter Inc. podcast. We're going to record that this weekend, so look forward to that. Anyway, there's a quick look at some interesting Barr typewriters, and I'll talk to you again soon.